Security operatives yesterday recaptured about 99 inmates out of the 294 that escaped from the Kaba Correctional Center in Kogi State after some gunmen attacked the facility at 11:03 Sunday night, p.m. that should be. Although over 150 inmates were still at large as at the last night, reports also have it that no fewer than 2 security personnel, including a soldier and a police officer, died when the gunmen invaded the facility to free some inmates. Sources hinted that the suspected gunmen, who came in 7 Hilux vans with sophisticated weapons, were believed to have come on a mission to release some of the inmates from the correctional centers. The gunmen, however, had a field day shooting sporadically in the air, which enabled them to carry out their mission. While nothing, according to an account, suggested that an improvised explosive device was used to gain access, despite having an iron gate at the scene were shattered glasses of windows and broken ceilings. Late night, Francis Enobo, the spokesperson of the Nigeria Correctional Center, spoke to Arise News. He described the ordeal the wardens faced to defend the jail. All right, Tundu, another jail break.
Yet another one. We've had quite a long history.
It's fast becoming seasons of prison break in Nigeria.
Remember that show?
Philip Schofield.
Yeah. I just think it's really sad. I want to start off with the loss of life, the soldier and the policeman who lost their lives. I think that's a complete tragedy. And, you know, we talked yesterday about police brutality, but we must always be stressed, or I always try and stress the fact that we do owe our security forces a debt of gratitude, because while we're sleeping in our beds, they're the only ones out there protecting us. Yeah. And I wonder what it is that happened. How were they overpowered in this manner and they got murdered? I'm sure there'll be an investigation and we'll find out. But that for me is tragic. And then yet again, like you said, another prison break. You recall last year with the Edo State prison break, in spite of all kinds of, you know, threats and, you know, fire and brimstone going to be brought down upon them. Most of them have still not been found. They're still roaming the streets. So I'm not that optimistic about this particular one. There were some inmates that chose to stay behind, I think about 28 of them. Some have been captured already, but there's some that are still at large. So I worry about that. These are criminals, clearly hardened criminals who have been broken out of jail for a specific purpose. And I really shudder to imagine what that purpose could be. These are very worrying times. We already have enough to contend with insecurity. And having these people on the run, you know, convicts on the run, is not the most cheering prospect at all.
Okay, I think, again, this is the Nigerian story, what we face. The Kaba Medium Security Correctional Center was established in 2008 with a capacity of 200. Now, we're told, let's start at that level, that over 200 persons, 240 escaped, which is that you are also dealing here with a major problem with correctional facilities in Nigeria. They are overcrowded. You know, they are stretched to the limit. Why will a facility that was built to hold 200 persons be holding up to 294 persons? So 240 were told escaped on Sunday. Now, out of these 240, the total 294 housed in that particular facility, only 70 are convicted persons. So when you keep people in a correctional facility, what you are dealing with is, oh, these persons have committed a crime. They've gone through the justice administration system. They've been convicted. They are serving time. Out of 294 inmates, only 70 are convicted persons. The others are waiting trial persons. And we've always made the point here about fundamental human rights. Why keep anybody in the prison who has not gone through full trial? And for some of them, for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years. That was the first thing that stood out for me. The second thing is the fact that a prison facility, a correctional facility, as they now call our prisons, is a security unit which must be properly secured. Now, what level of security do we have in these correctional facilities? Because it looks like, you know, jailbreaks have become almost a routine, almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in Nigeria. In other words, it's a failure of the justice administration system in Nigeria, because the justice administration system moves from apprehension all the way to trial to when justice is done. So if you try people, you put them through the judicial process, the justice administration process, and then at the end of the day, you have facilities from which anybody can just escape at will. Then it means, of course, that justice is imperative in the country itself. What is the third point? The third point is that, this has become a regular pattern. Tundu just referred to the case of the prison in Ubiaja in Edo State, where, prisoners escaped, and up to now, we don't know who and who has returned. But there was also the case of the attack on the Imo Correctional Center in Owerri. Over 1,844 inmates escaped. The facility was even set ablaze. A neighboring police station was also set ablaze. There was no backup response. Nobody could protect the facility. And all of this, at the end of the day, we're told that some of the prisoners returned. But, how many more have returned since then? These things happen, and we just move on. And if these are criminals or they are waiting trial persons, they pose a serious threat to decent, innocent members of society. After a pattern, we've been told that in this particular case of the MSCC in Kogi State, that the head of the correctional facility has said they've embarked on a recall and rescue procedure. It's not enough to say that. What is the guarantee that that will happen? The other question to ask is that in all of these jailbreaks, is there any kind of collusion? Because in Nigeria, never rule out anything between the prison authorities themselves and those who attack these prison facilities. The warders, they are supposed to be paramilitary agents. They are always ill-equipped. They are always absent-minded. They don't succeed in helping to secure the facility. In some cases, there was a case in Kogi, they called for backup. That was foiled. So why is it that most of the time, nobody can prevent any jailbreak? So it's a story of incompetence, of collusion, although we don't have immediate facts in that regard, and of the failure of the system to see through the justice administration system. And finally, nobody should be an awaiting trial person, for so long.
But to your earlier point, the overcrowding was to do with the fact that there was a problem in another correctional facility where the fence was damaged in some way. Then those people had to be taken to bunk in this place. And it also serves to, your point about collusion. They all happened to be at the same place at the same time in that place when this happened. So we have to wonder.
Yeah, but there's no reason why Nigeria should have overcrowded prisons. Yeah. Have you seen some prisons in Europe?
Right.
Or, if you see some prisons in Europe, you like to commit a crime so that you can eat some free food for some time.
And
because these are supposed to be correctional centers.
Yes, that's the word, correctional. But does it really correct anybody or make them worse off? That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll have the team, Rotus, Michael, and everybody here to give us updates on Africa Global Business. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Over to you, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. African Business Update is focused on Africa's largest economy. We're sticking with Nigeria today and talking about debt. The Center for Social Justice is a non-government NGO, a non-governmental organization focused exclusively on fiscal responsibility. And what they did recently was to look through the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper for 2021 through to 2024. And they're ringing, or rather sounding the alarm really loud when it comes to Nigeria's debt. So there's a number of charts here. Let's quickly go through this. By the way, it's the lead director for the Center for Social Justice, Mr. Eze Onyekwere, is the one who was going through these numbers. So first off, Nigeria has spent 11.6 trillion naira on debt servicing between 2015 to 2020. And there's a chart where they compare debt servicing to capital expenditure. So it's 11.6 trillion naira in debt servicing. That is the cost of your debt, versus capital expenditure, which is supposed to be on infrastructure and improving human capital development and so on and so forth. So that's that first chart. There's a lot of charts, but we'll quickly go through these as quickly as possible. So that's your first chart there. The debt servicing on the left, capital expenditure on the right. Now, next chart is the growth in Nigeria's debt servicing. It's of what, 200%? We went from, if you look at next chart now, Nigeria's debt service growth, you're looking at 2015, 953 billion naira, 2016, 1.4 trillion, 2017, 1.8 trillion, 2019, 2.2 trillion, 2018, 2.2 trillion, 2019, 2.25, 2020, almost 3 trillion naira. That's your debts in Nigeria's debt service growth. Next, public debt stock. We know what this is. This comes from the Debt Management Office, where they tell us the amount of total public debt stock that's held by Nigeria. We've seen that grow from 2015, 12.6 trillion naira, all the way to 32.9 trillion in 2020. So that's the growth in public debt. And it keeps growing because there's more borrowing on the way. We're getting a Euro bond and all these other things coming up. Now, this is pretty alarming. I picked this one out. Personnel costs. We've talked about the size of government, right? Personnel costs, this is our next chart now. Personnel costs 2021 through 2024 projected as a percentage of non-debt recurrent expenditure. Look at these numbers. 2021, 66.4% of your non-debt recurrent expenditure on personnel costs. 2022, 68%, 2023, 67.9%, 2024, 67.9%. So almost 70% of your non-debt recurrent expenditure is going to paying salaries. This again comes into the conversation on reducing the size of government. But it's a complicated conversation, because where are they going to go? Look at what El Rufai is doing with the teachers and public workers in Kaduna. He's come under a lot of fire, but he bit the bullet and he went for it. So, can Nigeria do the same? Finally, here's a quote from their Facebook page. I took this from the Center for Social Justice. It said, and this is something that Zainab Ahmed, the Minister of Budget and Planning, is, unfortunately, she's guilty of doing this, but she's not the only one. Debt to GDP, and I think Rufai has pointed this out a couple times, with this fixation on debt to GDP. So let's look at this quote here. They said, the fixation of the federal government of Nigeria on debt as a ratio of GDP is outdated and has no relationship with Nigeria's current economic realities. The size of GDP is not used in debt service payments, a situation where a greater part of GDP is not contributing to taxation and government revenue calls for great caution in using the usual debt to GDP semantics. Finally, this is another conversation we had prior. Nairametrics is continuing their study of the Central Bank of Nigeria's balance of payments, which show how much foreign exchange goes out and comes into Nigeria. And apparently, last time, we talked about education and how they looked at the balance of payments data from the CBN. 28 billion naira went towards foreign education over the last 10 years. Well, now, Nairametrics has looked at, and they're a financial advocacy website, Nairametrics. They now looked at how much money has gone to professional services. Apparently, based on central bank balance of payment data, Nigeria has spent 55 billion naira. That is Nigerian firms on foreign professional services, engineering, software engineering, aeronautic, whatever, just professional services, so experts and so on and so forth. So, look, this now brings the conversation. Remember, we were going back and forth a bit about a technical partner that was picked for the e-Naira. We can't, on one hand, lament the lack of education and quality of our graduates and our workforce, and then criticize when our public and private firms go overseas to get expertise. That's our African Business Update. Please chew on it. Go ahead and chew on it, guys.
I will bite on it big time this morning. See, people should not call a dog a monkey for us. Please, I hate it when they do it, especially out of the Ministry of Finance. I hate it when they do it. Debt to GDP ratio, you might say, is outdated, but the debt is used to improve GDP. When you take debt, you develop infrastructure that has a direct correlation with GDP. So take, for instance, when we brought out the large GDP numbers, we saw increase in rail tickets. That was not there before. Transportation made a big showing on the GDP. because we took out debt and we built Lagos Ibadan, and those rail tickets can be put part of the GDP. So there is a correlation. And when you also look at debt servicing, see the chunk it is taking out of the money we could have used for capital expenditure to increase the GDP. You said in 5 years we spent over 11 trillion. That is the same amount we will have spent on one budget cycle. That could pass for one budget cycle. There were years we even had less than 11 trillion to service debt. And it is servicing, it is the interest, not the capitalization of that debt. So we are borrowing stupidly. That's my way for, we are borrowing very stupidly. We are not doing our math efficiently at all. And the stats are there. Debt is supposed to drive capital spending. So if what you are paying on servicing the debt is more than the capital spending, it is stupidity. Look at all nations in the world. When you see nations like China that have debt to GDP ratio of over 240%, it's a concern. China is talking about their own debt, but you are seeing the knock-on effect on the infrastructure. So if debt to GDP ratio in China is 240%, you are seeing an economy that is going to close to 20 trillion. But we keep seeing a lot of debt here. We are not seeing the knock-on effect on the GDP. In fact, the GDP keeps falling. So don't call a dog a monkey for us. Please.
Okay, I think the issue is as follows. I mean, the U.S. has a heavy debt burden. China has a heavy debt burden. But the question is, yes, if you borrow to fund development, there must be evidence.
Yes.
There must be accountability.
Yes.
There must be transparency. The big problem that we have in Nigeria is not the argument by the Debt Management Office. It's not even the Ministry of Finance. It's the Debt Management Office telling us over the years that the debt to GDP ratio in Nigeria is sustainable. Now, okay, if you say it's even one of the lowest when you compare with our peers, okay, where is the evidence? What have you done with the money that you have borrowed? Nigeria looks like a sinkhole. We borrow the money. We don't see the evidence in terms of infrastructure that has been provided, in terms of activities within the economy, in terms of the impact on the lives of the ordinary people. So, you know, the CSJ, led by Ezen Yekwere, asking for fiscal responsibility, asking for transparency and accountability. I don't think you can quarrel with that theoretical point. What is important for government is not to say, oh, these people are just talking nonsense. No, that's not the approach. It's to begin to prove to us that even when we borrow, the average Nigerian on whose behalf money has been borrowed benefits from it. Now, the other issue about the huge amount between that has been spent over a period on recruitment of professional and technical services from an expatriate extraction point. The question to ask is, why do multinationals in Nigeria prefer to bring expatriate staff? And that also links up to the skill set that is available within the Nigerian environment. I know many Nigerian companies, some of them were mentioned in the Nairametrics report, who would rather recruit people from abroad. Some of them are Nigerians, because many of these employers of labor, they do not trust the kind of skill set that we produce from the Nigerian education system. You have all these graduates who do not know the difference between a formal letter and an informal letter, who wrote school SAT or wrote their exams doing simulation scientific experiments, and who cannot even, do practical work. It was not always like that in Nigeria. Nigeria used to be the provider of skilled labor for many countries of the world. And Nigeria still, in some disciplines, continues to provide skilled labor. But in some areas of the economy, people prefer to bring expatriates. Multinationals prefer to bring their own people because they think they trust their skill set. And they will just, employ a few Nigerians, some of the diamonds that they can locate, and put them in there. So that's the problem. There's also the challenge of the abuse of expatriate quota. I think we have reached a point where we should be calling out the Nigerian Immigration Service. The department on expatriate quota is the most lucrative department in Nigerian Immigration Service. They abuse the quota. I mean, there are some companies in this country, you are talking about expatriates coming to provide technical services and, professional services in Nigeria. Have you not seen some of these companies operating in Nigeria that bring cashiers from India, from Pakistan, from Lebanon? Is it that Nigerians cannot operate ordinary cash machine? So we don't blame only the companies, we also blame the control system in Nigeria. But we also have to build confidence in our, people's skill set. Nigerian universities should stop producing graduates, who are not up to it. Many companies set up training departments because when these people come as interns, as whatever, and we recruit them, you just discover that you have to retrain them. They have to go through another round of formal education so that they can fit your purpose. So this is the big challenge that we face, but to look at the figure, I think that is frightening. If $55 billion has been spent on foreign expatriates, and many of these foreign expatriates, when they arrive anyway, they don't fit into the cultural space,
Well, the two stories you've shared this morning, Reuters, have a similar theme in the sense that the inflow must justify the outflow and vice versa. I think the problem with the expats being, paid exorbitant amounts to work here is that we are being denied valuable opportunities. I haven't really seen the expatriate quota being strictly upheld since the Obasanjo days, and that's something that should be attended to, as Dr. Abati was saying. But beyond what your point about qualifications and what have you, is also culture. People will bring in a cashier from God knows where. If they feel that Nigerians have sticky fingers, that perception does exist, yes. A lot of it is to do with trust. So even if you have the greatest qualifications in the world, you're seen as dishonest, and that's just really the bottom line. So that's another thing that needs to be addressed. And like you were saying about the semantics with the debt and the GDP, I've never really been convinced of that whole argument, quite frankly. When you have graphs and those charts that you showed, it's quite stark to see that we are in serious trouble. And again, back to the Obasanjo days, I'm not really in the habit of praising him. What's going on this morning? That's another thing that we haven't gotten right since his era.
He's my favorite president as far as
you're on your own are concerned with that.
In my lifetime. So,
but he did some good for this country. That can't be denied. Well, thank you, Reuters, for your time this morning. Moving on to more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, good morning. The financial markets overnight relatively muted, really. I'll explain why later. No great data actually coming out from anywhere, so it's quite quiet. There's nothing really for the markets to get their teeth into this morning. Another Fed official has spoken out about the possibility of a quick taper and all the rest of it. Well, it's just another voice, basically. OPEC keeping oil prices slightly higher with its increased forecast for 2022. So basically, Asian equities tracking Wall Street higher, Dow Jones ending about 0.75% higher last night. So therefore, Asian equities higher, apart from China, where there are worries about its big property giant debt. I'll come on to that in a moment. And also the further dismemberment of Ant Financial, which we were talking about yesterday. Elsewhere, the picture is slightly brighter, certainly in Japan. The Nikkei about 0.5% higher on the back of good chipmaker products, and also that's helping the South Korean Kospi as well. So back to China then, and the Evergrande, their property developer, says property sales are continuing to drop. It could default on its debt, and that's worrying everybody. Meanwhile, there are more COVID-19 infections in China's southeastern province. Now, the last time that something like this happened, it lasted probably about a month. if you look at the beginning and end of it in broad terms. And I think that's a worry as far as China's economy is concerned. But as I say, no big data so far. Now, if it's autumn, it's got to be the Apple launch. Now, what are they going to do? Apple has actually, I mean, it's full of hype, obviously, everything that Apple actually does. It used to be all about new products. Now, of course, they've got different things to concern them. Will we see a new iPhone? Will we see a new iPad and so on? I don't really know. But anyway, no doubt they'll be after something. But the thing to watch for, is it about new products or is it about revenue coming from other areas? That really is the thing, rather than whether you're going to buy a new iPhone or not. All those products are, of course, important. As far as the EU markets are concerned, well, the big one is waiting for the US inflation figures. Reading due at lunchtime today. Reuters will no doubt be talking about these. If it's continuing to run hot, inflation in the United States, well, obviously, there's more possibility of an interest rate rise there, not immediately, but in the nearer future, perhaps. Remember those producer prices, particularly high, up 8.3%, if you remember, on an annual basis in August. So there is a lot of pressure behind the markets there. As far as UK jobs are concerned, we've had the unemployment report this morning. Unemployment rate fell to 4.6%. It's also cautioned that a lot of young people are actually suffered job losses. Furlough, of course, ending at the end of the month. But here's the thing. So the number of UK employees has risen to pre-pandemic levels on payroll. So something is going wrong. 1 million job vacancies in the country. Where are they going to be filled from? The UK Chancellor has, Rishi Sunak has taken taxpayer stakes in more than 150 startups of small business. The other side of that, of course, is you've got a Prime Minister who's been probably promising a lot of infrastructure projects, 2 of which have been canned yesterday. No more tunnel from Scotland to Northern Ireland, and no more allowances for the unemployed to start their own businesses. So as I was saying then, OPEC, given its forecast for 2022, sending oil spiking slightly higher. Tropical storm Nicholas in Louisiana and Texas is having that sort of effect as well. And gold continues basically in its sideways range. I suspect not a lot will happen to gold until we have a much firmer idea of overall global inflation, particularly in the United States, which we may have this afternoon. That's the global view.
2 questions, Michael. Number one, the umpers going on as regards corporate taxes. Trump achieved some things, brought more investment to America, with 21% corporate tax. Biden says he will increase it to 28%. They are fighting down the middle for 26.7%. How viable is that? And secondly, the fight also going on as regards the possibility of a failure of government as regards increasing the debt ceiling. That fight has been on for a while. The Republicans might probably be using that as a bargaining chip to be able to fight Biden on the 3.5 trillion he wants for infrastructure. How is all of this playing out, and how is this affecting the markets?
It's not affecting the markets at all because it hasn't happened yet. But how is it playing out? I think that what we're seeing is, I mean, we'll see whether or not Biden replaces Jay Powell at the Fed to start with. I mean, he may well do that. We don't know. What's his domestic standing like? I suspect probably quite good. Internationally, probably approaching zero, given Afghanistan and the rest of it. So he's clearly depending upon domestic politics. He's got a big job putting that, as you quite rightly observed, pushing that infrastructure thing still through. A little bit of it's gone through, as we know. We reported on that. There's still a lot more to move through, and it's very, very delicately balanced indeed. So what I suspect will happen is we'll be on a knife edge. And still, of course, do remember that we have a government actually running out of money. And that apparently, according to Janet Yellen last week, the Treasury Secretary, warning that the government's going to run out of money by October. So things, I think, looking pretty difficult in the United States as we speak.
Well, very quickly, the report by the Office for National Statistics in the UK. Yes, payroll has increased by over 241,000 persons who had added to the figures, up to about over 29.1 million. But at the same time, you still have a lot of vacancies. The furlough scheme ends September 30. Now, would that make any difference? And what we have experienced in terms of the increase in the employment figures, is this as a result of the relaxation of the pandemic? But what exactly happens after the end of the furlough scheme? What are your projections? Because the Chancellor is saying that this shows that our job plan is working. Is the job plan really working?
Well, I think the big question is, what else would you have done at the time when people were getting laid off through no fault of their own? So at the time, we did say on this programme, did we not, that the furlough scheme presented an alternative, that there probably wasn't anything else to do. But we did also note that, that at the end of it, there were going to be problems about whether these people actually had jobs to go to. So for domestic use in this country, here's what happens. That your employers are not legally bound to take you back on again. I've been advising people in other programs that I do to get in touch with your employers if you're on furlough and say, am I actually coming back at the end of September, or have you replaced me? For all those kinds of reasons, we do not know what the rate of unemployment is in this country. Yes, we have those figures out this morning, but you quite rightly say they're based on a premise of of employment continuing as normal. And of course it isn't, because many people are actually employed for doing nothing, or rather getting paid for doing nothing and staying at home. So all that's got to unwind. The other thing about the job vacancies, I think that's pretty serious actually, because what it shows is we've seen the HGV crisis in this country, 100,000 lorry drivers short, and that's affecting supply chains. These other people whom we never thought about agricultural labourers really, because it's such a small part of the economy. But all these things are now absolutely vital. We've got people in care homes. Will they actually go back to work? Will all those kind of service industries re-employ people? No, but at the moment, right, there is a gap of unemployment in this country, which is quite huge. And how? No, I think that what's happening at the moment is that we've had a surge in the recovery actually growing. We've had employment coming back. I think it's almost certainly going to flatten off. Storm erupts, doesn't it? You've got high unemployment, you've got unknown unemployment, you've got prices rising, and you've got nobody wanting to raise interest rates. That's a job for the big boys to do, isn't it?
Yeah, but Michael, before we go, the biggest jump, in terms of the employment figures we've seen in the hospitality sector, hotels and restaurants. Is there an explanation for that? A special explanation, perhaps?
Yes, simply because people don't particularly want to go back to those kind of jobs, and we've lost, because of Brexit, an enormous workforce that was actually filling those jobs, and people at that kind of level were particularly good at it. We're not very good at serving people in this country, and people don't want to do it. They'd rather stay at home and do nothing. I think there's a big streak of laziness, which it may be that when push comes to shove, people really have to think about going back. Also, the fact that these jobs are actually not paid very well as well, that's something which service industry is going to have to come to terms with. And that will mean that when you come to London and you have your meal out, it'll cost you more. But I might buy it for you.
All right. Amazing times here and there. Thank you so much, Michael. And you've got a great Fender guitar at the back. I'm sure you're a rock star, Michael. Just kidding.
Anyway, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll be talking to Professor Boniface Oye Adeniran, a retired professor of obstetrics and gynecology, College of Medicine of the University of Lagos. Stay with us. We'll be right back.